Hey everybody, this is Strategywizard. This is my brother Josh, who also known as the Tolkien Geek, and this is my cousin Zack. Today we're going to be doing a review of A Game of Thrones, the board game by George R.R. Martin. This is the second edition. Never played the first, but this is designed by Christian Peterson. It's for 3 to 6 players, and it lasts a really long time. So, that being said, we've played this a few times. Yeah. How many times have we played?
It's been so long, I don't remember.
Enough, several.
Yeah.
And not enough to remember how to play, but to...
this is a game where you have to read the rules almost every time you play just to make sure you didn't forget anything, unless you're playing it all the time, which we never had quite that luxury.
But it's not as bad as War of the Ring. It's not that complicated.
Or Risk.
Well, Risk is simpler but worse.
It's long for no reason. That being said, we're going, obviously this is, in our opinion, an upgrade to Risk. The question is, how much of an upgrade? Let's go to the table, we'll talk about how to play, and then we will tell you what we think. Okay, so this is what A Game of Thrones, the second edition board game, looks like when it's set up for 3 players. The Tolkien Geek is sitting over here with the Lannisters. I'm here with the Starks, and Zack is over here with Baratheon. So, the basic flow of this game is you start off with very few units, as you can see. You're going to be expanding those units, you're going to be marching orders all the way through as far as you can go safely, and trying to collect castles, which are, there's a few castles in different spots and different territories on the board, and the goal of the game is to get to 7 that you own and keep 7 until the end of that round. If you do so, you win. Otherwise, there's also a time track, and the time track goes up to 10 rounds. If no one has succeeded in winning in 10 rounds, then you just find out who has the most and do the tiebreakers and everything to see who actually won. So, how do we get started, everybody? What's the first thing that you do?
Well, let's flip the cards.
Yeah, apart from the very first round where you would not do this, on preceding rounds, you'll flip these cards. So this is basically the main random aspect of the game for the most part. Most of it, there's very little randomness, but this is random, but in a somewhat thematic way. So right now we have, you resolve these in order, the Roman numeral 1, then 2, then 3. You always resolve them in order. In this case, we have, each person has a token, and these tokens, in this case, is the holder of the Iron Throne, which is Zack. We'll go ahead and use this as a chance to, Zack, tell us about what this means, since you have the Iron Throne.
The player holding the Iron Throne decides the outcome of all ties that occur in the game, with the exception of ties in combat, and ties in determining who the winner is.
Okay, so basically what that means is Baratheon, which is Zack, since he's the closest to the Iron Throne symbol, he is not only going to go first in every round, but he's also, because he has the Iron Throne token being at the number 1 slot, he gets to break non-combat ties. Josh is second in turn order, and I'm last. So let's go ahead and go to fiefdoms. I'll cover that, because I have the sword being Stark. I am number 1. That breaks combat ties. So in any time I fight anybody, no matter how many players you're playing with, I'm going to break combat ties, and with this sword, I have per round, I can flip it over and give myself +1 combat power in one fight. And everyone else, it's just breaking ties down the line, and the last person loses all ties. So now the Raven, which is the King's Court.
Right, the King's Court track, the first thing it does is determine how many star tokens you get to play, and we haven't got to order tokens yet. But order tokens are the way that you determine what actions you take in a given round. You place them down upside down so nobody can see, and then at the beginning everybody turns them all up together, and then the player with the Iron Throne goes first, uses one of those actions, then the next player down the Iron Throne track does another action, etc. The star tokens, there's 1 star token per type of action, and they just give an extra benefit. So being higher up on the King's Court track lets you use more star tokens. At a certain point, you just don't get to use any. And the additional benefit is at the very top of the King's Court track, you get the Raven, which the holder of the Raven at the beginning, when everybody flips over their order tokens, you can look at the board and say, I don't really like the way that turned out. I want to switch 1 order token that I still haven't used for one that's already on the board, and that way you can change your strategy a little bit last minute.
So that's how all of this works, and this can change. Now, everyone has a certain starting place, and of course, what happens is if there's 6 players and you use all the different houses, then this would all be filled up. And you'll notice, you might be able to see, I don't know, but this is actually a separate piece here. If you're playing with 3 or 4 players, you put this overlay, but if there's more players, then you use this, so there's more stars available for everybody. That way more people can get in the star grabbing frenzy. So the way this changes, there are cards in here that will start a bid, and you will use power tokens that you will collect over the course of the game in order to secretly bid. It's a secret bidding system where people will put out, and everyone will reveal at the same time how many they bid. The Iron Throne holder gets to break ties, but once the bidding's done, then you will rearrange accordingly. So just don't think that you're stuck in a certain thing. You can actually modify it as you go along. So the first card lets the Iron Throne token, the holder of the Iron Throne token, choose a few options. If we want to update our supply, which is, show us where the supply is.
Supply track is right here. We have 2 people on the same one. But,
yeah.
Basically, this determines how many units you can have in one area. Even though their values can be different. For example, the footmen are worth 1, the horses are worth 2, or knights. And then you actually have catapults.
Oh yeah, siege
engines.
Yeah.
Which determine they're 4 for
Yeah,
attack, but 0 for defense.
And only in an attack against a castle are they 4.
Yes.
Otherwise, attacking they're 0 and defending they're 0.
But meanwhile, you have basically you can have 2 units together as an army, or 3 units, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah, the more supply you have, the bigger armies. Not only you can have a higher quantity of different armies and larger armies in a single spot.
Yeah.
So Zack could decide if he wants to update supply, which is based on the territories. Different territories have supply tokens or supply symbols on them. So if he's been marching out and collecting a bunch of territories with supply icons, he might want to do that. He wants to update that supply.
But I would. Not in this round.
Yeah, at this point...
what was the other option?
The other option is that everyone gets to muster units.
That makes more sense.
Now, how does mustering work?
Basically, mustering units on castles. In this particular situation, every castle you have, if it's there's castles and fortresses. The castles are 2 units and the fortresses are 1.
That's right. So, and that basically, let's just clarify, a horse counts as 2 units in that case. So if you wanted to make a knight, you would have to use all 2 points worth of mustering at this castle, or you could get 2 pawns if you have enough supply to make armies that big. And boats are worth 1, and siege engines are cost 2. So just as a point of reference. So, or the card has no effect. So Zack has these options because he owns the Iron Throne. He might make the choice, like he says, would you choose to muster?
I would choose to muster.
Okay, so all of us would then decide in turn order how we want to increase our unit supply. Now you'll notice everyone has a certain number of units here. You cannot go over these units. This is the maximum, which means you're never going to have retardedly big armies. You're not going to have 100 people in one spot. You're going to have a lot of small armies, which this limits it anyway, but even you can't just, there's a point where you won't even have a bunch of 1s out here. You're going to run out of units if you spread enough. So you only have so much you can grow, which is a good or bad thing depending on how you look at it, but we'll talk about that later. Now, here's one important point. This has an icon of a mammoth skull, which lets you know that the wildlings are going, oh, this should be starting on 2, by the way, but it would move up. The threat of the wildlings increases with cards that have that symbol, and this one also has that symbol, so it will move up now that we're moving to the next card, but nothing else happens. Then we get to, well, let me just go ahead and cover this. What happens if we get all the way up to 12?
If you reach 10, that's when the wildlings will attack.
It actually is 12.
Oh, it actually is 12?
Yeah, it actually is 12.
Okay. Well, when you get up to 12, the wildlings will attack, and then all the players have to basically contribute, is it power tokens?
Yeah, it is power
tokens. In an attempt to match the value of the wildlings. Oh, I remember why I was confused. There's some cards that say the wildlings attack, even if it's not at number 12.
Yeah, some of these cards will just make it happen. I mean, and the thing is, once the wildlings attack, this will get reset back to 0. If a wildlings attack card shows up, they will attack at an attack power of 0, but that still matters. Why?
Because when all the players basically put in, it's like bidding. You put in a secret number of power tokens. You all flip. All right. So Strategywizard put in 3. Both of us put in 2, he put in the most. Now, when you fight the Wildlings, whoever puts in the most will generally get a bonus for being the person who put in the most effort. And then whoever put in the least will, in the case of, I think it's only in the case of a loss, will suffer a detriment.
Yeah, and I'll read the top card, because what's going to happen is this card is going to be flipped after the battle's over, and you're going to just figure out what happens. If we won by contributing more power to the combat than they have power, or at least, I think we have to exceed, then if we won, then the highest bidder, in this case me, I return my entire house card discard pile to my hand. Your house cards are your combat cards. Everyone has the exact same number of cards, but they have different abilities and symbols and whatnot, so everyone has a different set of cards, but as you play them in combat, you discard them, so your hand is getting less and less and less. Well, this would let me get all those cards back, which is a very powerful thing if I've used my best ones. I would really be excited to win that. But if we had lost, the lowest bidder, if he has more than one house card in his hand, he discards all cards with the highest combat strength. So that's really bad, because then you're losing your best cards. Everyone else would, even the person who bid the highest, if we lost, even the person who bid the highest, everyone else, if they have more than one house card in their hand, they must choose and discard one of those cards. So nobody typically wants to lose one of these. It's usually very bad. But it's one of those things that it could happen, because maybe you don't have enough power tokens amongst you to do it. But here's the point. Once you bid...
That happens especially like if you just had a bidding war for the different game tracks.
Exactly.
And then the Wildlings attack the very next turn.
You may not have enough.
That's usually the worst possible time it could happen.
But whenever you bid, you put it in your general pile. You don't get to get them back, even if you lost. They go away.
They are a waste.
Yeah, so you want to be careful how you bid. It's a really big deal. Oh, one other thing, I'm pretty sure the Raven also gives you the ability, instead of swapping, you can look at the top card of the Wildling track, and you can put it to the bottom if you don't like it.
I've forgotten about that.
Which is very powerful, because there's a card in here where nothing happens either way. If you lose, nothing happens. If you win, nothing happens. And if that one in particular, if the person with the Raven sees that, they can leave it there knowing I'm not going to bid anything on that, and no one else knows, are they leaving it there because they have something really cool they want to try to get, or is it something that what's bad is not so big of a deal, they don't care, or is it nothing? That's a very powerful situation to be in. Now, that being said, there's another card here. The holder of the Valyrian Steel Blade chooses one of the following conditions for this planning phase. The planning phase is when you place your order tokens, which we're going to show you how that works in just a second. But basically, it says I can make it to where defense orders cannot be played. And that's one of the types of order tokens which gives you more defensive value if someone attacks you. So I can make it to where we cannot play defense, or I can make it to where March +1 orders cannot be played. There's a March order that gives you +1 to your attack. I can ban those, or I can have no restrictions. So being the highest on the combat track, I now have the ability here to make it to where other people are less defensive against me if I want, or I can make it to where people can't march against me with a +1 while I hold my +1 here, or I can have no restrictions. So the point is, having these cards, it's going to matter, not only these tokens matter for in the middle of the game what you get to do, but it's also going to affect things that come up here. And so whenever the bidding war happens, everybody wants to get as many of these as possible. That's just the way it is. So that being said, let's go ahead and go over placing our tokens. Let's go ahead and place some.
All right. And just before we get started, we should mention there are 5 types of tokens. There are power tokens, a crown. There are raid tokens, and that's an example of a star token. The raid is like a torch. Defense tokens have a helmet. March tokens have a battle axe. And support tokens have a gauntlet. I don't know if you could tell that's a gauntlet from there, but so when you place the tokens, you basically put one token in each territory that you control.
Upside down.
Upside down.
Yeah, that way no one knows what you're trying to do.
Which is probably one of the best parts about this game, is that you don't get to know what your opponent's going to do until the very end. And then you see how it unfolds. And then you get to decide what order you want to perform those actions in.
Exactly. And that's really that's something that becomes very important, is the order, because it's precisely because you don't have to do your tokens all at once. You can purposely save certain attack tokens until the last second to force your opponent possibly to make a move that sets you up for a good attack or whatever the situation might be. But in this particular case, we're going to flip these over all simultaneously. We're going to go ahead and flip everything over. Now we all see what choices we made. Now here's the thing. Let's just go very quickly over what each one actually does. We talked about combat. The axe means it could be, it's a movement, and you don't have to do it. I could discard that whenever it's my turn and say, I don't want to move. But you can move with it one space, or you can attack somebody when you move into a space. And the +1 just means, the star just gives it a +1, so you actually get a little bonus to your attack. The crown means that you get more power tokens, but if you have, and you get a power token not for having this, but if there's any crowns in your territory, you get that many bonus power tokens. And
yeah, whenever you use the crown.
Yeah, when you use the crown, only when, yeah, otherwise it's useless. That crown is useless unless you do this, or except for a few cards that come up that give you some power tokens. But also, if you have the star, it lets you muster units. Now here's the important part. You cannot muster units unless you play a star crown on a place with a castle, or if a card comes up that tells you to muster, or in his case, Zack could have chosen to muster, and he would have.
Yeah.
So those are the only ways you can get units. So this is not a game where you're just generating units all the time. It's an important decision to make, because since you don't have always a ton of star tokens in Zack's case, he only has one. Does he, and especially future rounds, is he going to want to use his 1 star to recruit units, or is he going to want to use it for a defense? Because that's one of the a defense. Normally, if you play a defense token, it gives you a +1 to defense, but the star gives you +2. And in here, small numbers like that make a big difference. You want,
absolutely,
yeah, you want to have as much as you can. So, and support. Zach, tell us what support does. That's really important.
Support basically just lets you help with adjacent attacks.
So let's simulate that over here.
Especially with boats.
Let's get everybody up here. Let's just pretend I've got a knight right here, and let's say your guys right here. Let's say y'all don't like each other.
Oh, we're fighting?
Yeah, y'all are
so
fighting.
we would have attack tokens.
Well, I would probably have a defense token.
Yeah. And then you would throw a support on your horse.
In a case like this, I am supporting. In this case, Zach's attacking. And now let's say we can.
Let's do a battle. Let's do a battle. So we would each pick a card out of our hand to play, and the cards have their own.
You can support either attack or defense.
Yeah, I can support either one.
So
and I would right now, since they're fixed to attack, at this point, I decide who I'm going to help and who I'm going to hurt. And here's the important part. We could have talked about this earlier. You know, Zach or Josh could be like, "Hey, come help me," and I could theoretically say, "Oh yeah, I'll help you," and I'll help you. And at this point, I can choose whichever one I want. So let's say in this case, I go, "Oh man, I think Zach's probably going to win." I would just support over here and say, "I'm going to contribute 2 points of attack +1 because I played the star support to help him." So now he has an additional 3 attack on this assault.
And then we would play a card.
Secretly.
We flip them over. So then we'd resolve.
Yeah, in this case, Josh played his best, which is a 4, and Zach played one of his middle-of-the-road cards, which is a 2. He has text. What did your text say?
If you win this combat, gain 2 power tokens.
So in this case, he hopes he wins so we can get more power tokens for bidding later, or it does other things too. For example, I'm just going to throw this out there just so we don't forget, because we probably will. If you ever move and leave a place, you can use one of your power tokens to claim it as your territory. That's the other thing you could use it for. So he might want that for that reason.
And as things stand currently, Zach has played a +1 attack. I've played a +1 defense. We each have 1 footman, and so everything is equal except for the cards. So as it stands, I'm currently winning, and that,
with the exception of
me supporting.
right, and that's where
the support makes a big difference, because suddenly everything swings in Zach's favor in this case, because I had 3. 2 + 3 is 5. Now,
and let's talk about this on the cards. Some of the cards have swords and castles. The swords kill units, the castles protect you from swords.
more specifically, a sword kills a unit if you win. If you lost and you had a sword, you don't kill anybody.
Yes. So in this particular situation, should Strategywizard decide to support me, then I get to blow Stannis out of the water. And
Tywin.
Tywin. Sorry, I'm reading my own cards. Sorry about that. Yeah, tie went out of the water, so
Right.
there's no more.
But if I would have decided to help Josh, then it would have ended up a little differently. Because here's the thing: if I help Zack, not only would his sword kill his one unit, that would wipe him out. Zack would move in, and he would not get to retreat. On the other hand, if we did it this way, if I help, not only does Josh win, he gets his 2 power tokens, but this sword doesn't do anything because Zack lost. But here's the thing: Zack doesn't lose any units because Josh had no sword, so he retreats to a legal retreat place.
And he could retreat here because that is also adjacent to the combat area, correct? Or would he have to retreat back to where he came from?
I think you can retreat in anywhere that's legal.
Okay.
Any legal place.
I know that's true for the defender. I just wasn't for sure if that was also true for the attacker.
So the point is, support makes a humongous difference. Whenever you get to the point where everyone's all up in each other's face, you start getting nervous because people can be defending, attacking, supporting, and you don't know who's on whose side or who wants to help who. And
you could have verbally promised somebody, "I'll support you on attacking this person," but then they could totally change.
Yeah, it is not a guarantee in this game.
There's no honor amongst Game of Thrones players.
Yeah.
Well, and let's go ahead and talk about another scenario that could have happened. If you had placed a raid token right there,
Yes.
then you could have raided his
Oh
support.
yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that brings out the other token that we haven't talked about.
Right. The raid token that lets you remove
Support tokens
and power
and
tokens.
other raid tokens and the power tokens.
Right.
And if you raid a power token, basically that person loses one of theirs, and the person who played the raid gets one from their own supply.
Right. For other raid tokens or support tokens, it just means you take the token off the board and it's no longer in play.
Yeah.
You cannot remove a march or a defense order with a raid. The theory being, of course, that marching and defending, you're really going out in full military force, whereas a raid is a much smaller affair, and so you're not going to overcome that.
The one exception is if you play the star raid token, then you can get rid of a defense. But that's because apparently your raid is a powerful raid. You're not just playing with a little few scouts. You've got some soldiers going in there.
It's a raid designed to
Disrupt.
disrupt defensive maneuvers.
Yeah.
So as you can see, let's just go back to this. That's why these stars are so important. Your star tokens are significantly powerful. The more star tokens you can play on your turn,
They're
especially
power moves.
Yeah, that's what they are.
They're power moves.
And just for sake of completion, the star tokens for defense and march, they're just 1 point higher. In fact, actually the march tokens
Has a -1.
there's a -1 and a 0, and then the star token is a +1. The defense tokens are 1, 1, and then the star token is +2. They just literally add that. And then the support token, again, is just... The support token normally just adds
Whatever
the
your
value
troops-
of your unit, but the star token would add +1 in addition to that.
Yeah. So in this case, their cards will go in their discard pile, and that way they can't use it next time. So at this point, I level my cards. So the more people go into combat, and I don't, eventually I'm going to have the advantage, because I'm going to have more cards to use. And everyone has to take that kind of stuff into consideration. And the more they fight each other, the more they're going to realize, wait a second, we're weakening ourselves. Now we need to take out the person who has all the good cards. So who you want to help and hurt is going to change over the course of the game.
Well, let's talk about the fact that the cards are very asymmetrical.
Very asymmetrical.
So almost everybody has similar point values, but their actual...
Actually, the point values are identical.
Yeah, it's always
Set.
1 4, 1 3, 2 2s, 2 1s, and a 0.
But your what they do are completely different.
Exactly. So what does your number 4 do? Your most powerful?
If your opponent has a higher position on the Iron Throne, then this card gains +1 combat.
So Zack starts
it can become
off
5.
up here. He starts off at the top. So the point is, if he ever loses the top, if he fights someone who is higher than him,
My 4 becomes a 5.
yeah, and he's one of the possibly the only. I think he's the only card that can get that powerful. So
I think so.
that's a really big deal. My 4 gives me 2 swords. So if I win a combat with this guy, I'm going to be doing a lot of killing of units. And we already saw Josh's 4, but his 3 is particularly significant.
Yeah, but my 3 is arguably better than my 4 because it's 3 and it has 3 swords, which means if you're fighting a large army and you are assured of winning, then you can play 3 swords. Nobody has 3 castles on their card.
Now,
You're guaranteed
Which
to
means
kill
you're
units.
guaranteed to kill
at least 1, and you're probably going to kill more than 1.
right. And if you're extremely lucky, you kill 3 enemy units. And given the limitations on armies,
And how rare mustering happens,
that is a
devastating.
devastating thing to lose 3 armies at one time.
And let's talk about the fact that this game does kind of give you a lot of defense. There's not a whole lot of.
It is very difficult to play an outright onslaught.
Yeah.
Partially because it is difficult to build up a large army. Also because you do have to traverse a lot of space to start really attacking people, especially in a 3-player game. In a 6-player game, it's a little tighter.
Yeah, you're on top of each other.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, let's go ahead and mention this. All these tokens down here, we have these little cardboard tokens that are in these certain spots. If you have less than 6 players, you're going to be putting out some of those, and that keeps people from those right there. You cannot get into at all. You can't fight those.
Yeah, if you're playing with 3 players or less, basically this half of the board is just
off limits.
Off limits.
Which basically makes it to where I'm not just stuck up here going, oh, I only have this much, but they can just go down there and take a bunch of freebies. And in, I think, 4 or 5 players, some of those tokens are there, and you can take some of them. So it just takes a certain amount of combat value, kind of like this one.
Yeah. Which basically, you have to have a combat value of 6 in order to take it, but it's a pretty nice little pad right here. You got castle, you got your crown, and you got supply, so the Eyrie is a good place to have.
And this one.
Which is
King's
a
Landing.
combat of 5 with 2 crowns and a castle.
Yeah, so there are some that you can take, but all the ones at the bottom in a 3-player game, that's a way of balancing it, because the more players you have, that'll be eliminated. In a 6-player game, the whole map is going to be covered by your units, because there's nothing that's off limits.
Before we leave the topic of moving and attacking, let's talk about
Ships
ship movement.
and their ridiculousness.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you have ships, let's just, for sake of argument, put a whole armada of ships here.
Well, yeah.
So-
Let's you say armada, but that's 4 ships. Okay.
Well, considering there's only 6
Well,
ships
yeah.
per person.
Although, thematically, we have to assume that one ship is a fleet.
Yes.
Yeah, at least a small fleet. So if I have ships all the way here, and you can see I've got them adjacent in each different spot, and let's say that this wasn't off limits, I could move with one march order
1 token.
anybody that's connected to a ship to any point along this chain that these ships are in a water area touching.
In 1 move.
In
In
one
one
move.
move.
Which
That is-
means
that is
that-
a big deal.
That you can attack my ships from there.
Well,
In
I can't attack
my area.
I can't attack your ships from there. I would have to attack your ship with my ship. But
But
yes.
yeah,
area.
let's say these weren't here and Josh had one more ship right there. He could attack Zack's home base
From here.
right here
With 1 move.
with one move, which is a little extreme for sure. There's no doubt about that. But it's something you need to know because it makes a big difference.
Yeah, the daisy chaining of ships makes a
Huge
some
difference.
crazy changes in the game.
One other important thing, boats can support a land battle, but land units cannot support a naval battle.
Which
That's
makes
important.
sense.
Because basically you have all these cannons on these boats and they're just firing in and blowing up the enemies. So that's a big deal for support.
Very reasonable.
Now that really is basically the way this game works. You're placing your tokens, you're revealing them, trying to figure out the right order to do your tokens, and that becomes very significant when everyone's on top of each other. And you're just trying to take castles and keep people from taking them from you. That is ultimately what you're doing in this game.
One last thing about ships, though, before we wrap. You can probably see there's all these little
Ports.
areas with anchors. That's a port. That's where you build ships. And basically that's kind of a...
Although you can build them into the sea if you want. You don't have to start them in a port.
Right, but the significance of the ports is if you even if an enemy ship controls your waters, say like right here, I can still build a ship in the port. And even more significantly, he cannot attack my ship while it is in port. I can attack out of port. He cannot attack into it. So that's a way that I can still contest sea power as long as I hold the land area where the port is.
Exactly.
Which keeps Greyjoy from winning.
Yeah, yeah, because Greyjoy is the sea power in this game.
Yes.
Which, in case anyone doesn't know, is right here. Now, speaking of Greyjoy, I just want, before we go to our final thoughts, unless anyone has anything else they want to throw out there first, I just want to talk about the theme of this game. Basically, you can tell from the artwork that we've shown you that the characters, and I don't know how well y'all can see from this distance, but the characters don't look like the characters...
Anything like the show.
Yeah. So this is more based on the books themselves. And theme-wise, it really does a pretty good job. Now, granted, I've not read the books, but having watched the show, I at least know... I know most of the characters, and I know that, there's a lot going on here that makes sense. For example, King's Landing, which we talked about earlier, has a lot of the power tokens because that's the seat of power. That's where you are. That's where the king is. So they do a good job of keeping things. Not only is the map. I mean that automatically is themed city, but everyone's in the place they should be. You've got Winterfell. You've got Greyjoy over here as the sea power that they're not connected to land at the beginning. So and just like the
Dragonstone.
yeah, the Baratheon army is also, they're marching into the land from an island. It's just, so you have that theme in there, and the character cards, you know, they, to a certain extent, they are even thematic. Like Greater Clegane, that is Josh's 3-sword attack. That's Greater Clegane. Anyone who knows anything about Game of Thrones knows that Greater Clegane is an unbelievable... Yeah, he's a crazy fighting force, and they make that it gives you that feel in the game. And also, I want to say, Zack has, some of his characters, they do, I think Sir Davos, what does Sir Davos do?
If Stannis is in the discard pile, it gets 1 combat strength and a sword icon.
Yeah, so basically, the idea is, well, I guess once Stannis is gone, suddenly he becomes more powerful because he was loyal to Stannis, so it's important to him that he's even more fighting harder, basically, because his loyalty.
Yeah.
So the theme comes across nicely, I think, in this game, so for anyone who's interested. That being said, when I bought this game, I didn't know what Game of Thrones was. Had no idea. And I just wanted the game because, honestly, it reminded me of an old video game that I grew up playing called Gemfire. I read the instructions online and I went, wow, this is Gemfire as a board game. I want it. And then later I found out that there was such a thing as Game of Thrones, because obviously I'm not up to date on my, at the time I was not up to date on my...
Pop culture.
Yeah, pop culture, but
HBO.
Yeah. But now that I know, it's I see the theming and it works. It really does a good job. So, that being said, does anybody else have anything they want to add before we go to our final thoughts?
I think we've probably already overwhelmed the audience with detail. We should probably move on.
Yeah.
Okay, well let's do it. We'll go ahead and go. We'll tell you what we think. Okay, so now that we know how to play, what do we think? First of all, before we give our review of the actual game, what do we think about components?
Components are pretty good quality. I mean, the pieces are plastic, but they are marbled, which is nice. It makes them look a little better than just a standard little plastic, you know.
They're not cheesy or flexible.
Right. They're definitely solid. They're not like a rubbery plastic. They are very hard, which is good. You can't really break them. The cards are nice. They have that nice linen finish to them. Even the cardboard pieces have a little bit of a linen finish to them. And that goes for, I mean, all the cardboard pieces are basically the same, different sizes and shapes, but effectively it's the same material throughout, and they're pretty high quality cardboard. They're not going to break anytime soon unless you are abusive with your stuff.
And I like these.
Yes.
I love these, what are they called?
Dividers or whatever you want to call it.
Player screens, yeah. Because they have information on the inside for setups, which makes it so much easier.
Not only do you get setup information, but it also gives you information on what each of the order tokens does, and who cannot be excited that there's actually artwork unique to which house you are.
Very thematic.
Wow!
And it looks good.
And the art is phenomenal. I don't know who did the art for this game, but they're good. They're
a champion of art. That's who did it.
Yes, it's very, very good.
And although none of the player cards match the show, who cares?
Exactly, because honestly,
a couple of them are kind of close by random chance.
And
Tyler description in the books, I guess.
Well, yeah,
probably so.
Probably.
And just, I'm an unbelief at how realistic the characters look. It's just, I mean, this artwork is just sick. If you don't like that, I don't really know what to tell you. I'm doing the wrong one.
You'd have to hate
just
realism in art to not like this art.
And in this game, I mean, we have to admit that Game of Thrones, storyline-wise, is a very gritty story, so it would make sense that these are not cartoon characters. They want to make them look real and cool and interesting, and I gotta admit, they do a great job. So component-wise, do you agree with everything?
Oh yeah, components are wonderful, absolutely wonderful. I will say that the power tokens are really tiny.
Yeah, the power tokens are the only thing that, which, don't get me wrong, the thing is, they need to be small because you're going to be putting them on the board to claim your stuff, and you don't want to take up too much space, but this is the least wowing of the components.
And the fact that you have to bid them, you have to be able to hold
a
in your
lot in
hand.
hand.
Right. You can't have anything huge doing that. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, but I lose pieces. So.
Yeah, try do your best not to lose them, and if you do, find some other suitable color, same color stuff you can use.
Pennies and nickels.
Colored beads. Something.
Now, what do we think about replayability?
Replayability is considering the setup is always the same, replayability is pretty high. I mean, the number of times that we've played this game, it always goes a little bit differently, and that's partially because, you know, the different factions, the different families, each have their own kind of not power set really, but like the cards have their own unique abilities and whatnot.
The setup's different for each
house. I mean, right off the bat, let me just say, Lannister starts off with 2 little supplies in their home base.
So they almost never lose it.
Yeah, they're and they start off along with Baratheon higher, and of course we didn't even go over Tyrell, Greyjoy, and Martell, what their setup's like. But because of that setup, some people are predisposed to having larger armies. Some people are predisposed to wanting to be more defensive. And if you change who plays which house,
the different personality playing the different house is going to dramatically affect how that plays out in the game.
Yeah.
And the other thing too, the other interesting thing that is different. Not only is each house different, but their immediate ability to expand is very different. Mm-hmm. The next, you know, almost the obvious place to go for Lannister is another space with a 2-tier castle, a supply, and a power symbol all in one space.
or
It's awesome.
they also have a spot with 2 supply right below them, so they're going to expand their supply and get bigger armies before anyone else. They're there for that.
Right.
Meanwhile, you know, Stark's got way more room to grow. I mean, there's actual more physical places, and they have a much bigger borders.
And nobody's next to them in the same way that other people are close, especially if you play with 4 players and you add Greyjoy. Now, here's the thing. As you add more players, it's decided for you who gets added. You don't get to say, oh, I'm going to be Martell in a 3-player game. No, that's not how it works. It's if you do 4, you add Greyjoy. If you do 5, you add Tyrell. And if you do 6, you add Martell.
We have never played with Martell.
Yeah, we've never gotten that far, unfortunately. Very sadly. But if you add Greyjoy, it seems like that would be totally unbalanced because he starts right on top of the Lannisters. But somehow it works because because they make sure that the water sections, Greyjoy can spread out without blocking off the Lannisters or being right on top of them. And yet they help actually kind of keep the Lannisters from growing ultra powerful because of how much supply they have.
And partially that is because, interestingly enough, the way they did the combat cards for Greyjoy, they tend to counteract Lannisters pretty well. So you can tell they put a lot of thought into, you know, how to manage
who's going to be close to who, and
how to manage the interactions that are inevitably going to occur, and they did a really good job with that.
And Zach, you played Greyjoy once. Well, adding Greyjoy, how did you feel? What do you think about adding that extra?
I hate boats.
You hate boats.
I hate boats. But that being said, Greyjoy definitely it's not a crippling position, but it's definitely if you hate the guy who's playing Lannister, it's so wonderful. It's so wonderful.
Or if you just hate Lannister.
Yeah, because you can put pressure. Greyjoy can put some serious pressure on Lannister. Now, here's the other thing, though. Let's say someone thinks, oh man, Lannister has too much advantage in a 3-player game because they have all the supply. Their armies are going to get huge. Well, here's the point. Stark and Baratheon can agree to try to put pressure on him.
Yeah.
It's not meant to be perfectly balanced. And that's kind of the fun of the game because it's going to get unbalanced as you play, and the players' interactions are going to reflect that because you're going to start going, hey, we need to go kill this guy. And you'll do that. I mean, there was one game in particular where we played where there was somebody who was just about to win. There was a winning play they could have done. Everyone kind of got together and realized, okay, it's time to stop that. And they ended up having not that much left after that round was over. Now, some people are going to say that's a bad thing. Because the swing...
There can be a giant swing, but that's only when you actually have people teaming up against you.
And that's one of those things, in a game like this, you have to know you're coming into a game about negotiating.
Yeah.
Much like Cosmic Encounter.
I mean, a little bit. It's not the same.
Yeah,
it's
a
different style of negotiation.
It's similar in the sense that the level of negotiation maybe the level is about the same. How you do it's totally different.
Right.
And what the significance of it is somewhat different, but there's a large level of negotiation in this game.
Yes, and just like in Cosmic Encounter, you can lie, cheat, steal. You could do whatever you want. There are very little in the way of limitations as far as, you know, what you can't do on those terms. It's the rules give you kind of a boundary to work within. Other than that, you're free to do whatever you want.
You can make promises all day long. Oh, I want to attack you there, and then they move there and you crush them. I mean, you can do whatever you want. And that's kind of the metagame will change as you play because you'll realize some people I'm not going to trust next time I play. I mean,
And that depends what the group you're playing with will determine a lot of how this goes. I mean, if it was just the three of us every time, it might get stale after a while, but you throw in one extra person, change who plays what house, it suddenly creates a totally different dynamic.
Yeah. And so the replayability really comes with more or less people playing with, and rotating out who's who. But I wouldn't put it up there as like we were referencing Cosmic Encounter. I wouldn't put
it's
it
not
up,
that
it's
much.
not that
Yeah,
much. It's not that high.
definitely agree with that. Here's the thing:
It's
it takes longer than a game like Cosmic Encounter. I mean, we're talking like 4 hours,
Easy, especially when you
10
get more
turns.
players.
10 turns,
and yet somehow it takes forever.
4 hours.
And if you play with people who are analysis paralysis prone, it can take really long.
Yes.
I mean,
if you have people who have played the game enough to really get a good feel for the strategy,
it'll go quicker.
Yeah, you could probably finish a game in 2 to 3 hours
on a lower player count.
Right, on a low player count. But the more players you add, the more who are new to the game, and the more prone they are to analysis paralysis, it'll start to drag.
But that being said, the way this game works, there is, for this style of game, I'd say there's a high level of replayability. Precisely because you have the negotiation and the support aspect that can throw kinks in things that in a more mathematical game would not happen. There's enough social environment to keep it different each time.
Yeah, if it wasn't for the little raid tokens and the support tokens, I don't think that
it wouldn't be nearly as interesting.
Yeah, it wouldn't be. Well, it would be too, rigid. This is the play every time. You would have a calculated idea of
it's
what
the
to
fact,
do.
and now we're going to go ahead and move into the strategic quality of this game, what we think about that. And I'm just going to start by saying, absolute genius having these order tokens that you play secretly and then reveal, because it makes it to where that simultaneous choosing basically what you're wanting to do and then adapting after everyone reveals it's so good.
It's phenomenal.
I mean, whenever I first saw that, I thought, wow, this mechanic needs to be in more games. Then they added it to Forbidden Stars, and I went, yes, there's more, because this mechanic is just good.
Well, it's very smart. It's way better than choosing at the time, rolling some dice, and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Risk.
Yeah,
it's way better than that.
Yeah, in Risk, you just move, attack, move, attack.
Yeah.
But here, there's a lot more going on. You're supporting, you're defending, you're doing the raids, hoping you're going to steal people's power tokens. I mean, there's just...
And the other thing that's nice about it, too, is, like you mentioned in the How to Play section, if you choose a March token, you don't have to resolve it. You can just say, I don't feel like moving because what I was planning to do is now way too risky.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, again, we keep comparing this to Cosmic Encounter for some reason, but because they're radically different games.
Yeah.
But unlike in Cosmic Encounter, where who you attack is determined, and the fact that you're going to attack them is determined, none of that is determined here. You have a lot more agency in what goes on in this game. You can choose your path a lot more.
Yeah.
Now that's also
especially with boats.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the flip side to that is other people's agency will encroach on your agency and really cut down on your options depending on how people play. But you can't ever blame fate, luck, the cards.
Well,
yeah, I mean, the only card
you can blame the player to your left or right. But
yeah, the only card flipping is really done at the very beginning of the round. And you already know what's going to happen.
Or when you fight the Wildlings.
And everything affects everybody, basically. Everyone's being... It's not like this person drew a card, oh man, I lost 2 of my units. There's nothing that's just you, unless the circumstance just happens to apply only to you in the global scheme of things.
Yeah, there's no like drawing the +4 wild and Uno. It's not quite like that.
I should probably mention that there is one other portion of this game that we've never played with, and I probably never will play with, but there's a little deck of cards, and even now I don't remember exactly how it works, but I want to say if you have a combat, you can make it to where each person draws a card, and it can add a modifier. That is... And I think they say specifically it's for people who don't want it to be so
rigid.
Yeah, where I have 5 units, he has 6 units, and I'm going to play this card. I know he has these cards. I mean, to a certain extent, you can get to the point where you know if you're going to win. Although the cards can really change things up, that's a way to add a little more randomness. I don't want the randomness, so I never play with it.
Right.
I would rather, but for people who do want a little more uncertainty in their battles, you can add those cards. And my gosh, if you want, add some dice. Make that your modifier. You can do whatever you want, but I think what makes this game good is the fact that there's very little randomness. I mean, the cards make a big difference, but that's not random. The cards you play it's like a bluffing game almost.
Well, yeah, and you cycle through them, so you know what the other person has.
Yeah, you know what the other person has, and there are cards that Tyrion Lannister, for those who like Tyrion, he's very useful in this game because he makes the opponent have to take their card back and play a different card, which can be game-changing. I mean,
if your opponent is down to a 4 and a 0,
you have to decide. Then that mind game goes. If you know they have Tyrion, do you play your 0 hoping they play Tyrion so you get your 0 and play your 4? Or do you go, maybe they won't play Tyrion, I play my 4? I mean, that's what makes the combat interesting. It's not just, I have more units than you, I win. And it's not dice rolling where you're going, I hope I get lucky. You actually have some choice to make in each combat that can make a massive difference.
Right, and in that sense, it's even a little bit like poker because of the bluffing involved. Yeah. And not only the bluffing, but there's, just the cards themselves. Each card has its own advantage. So, we've talked about...
which is very asymmetrical, and I like that part.
Right, asymmetrical is awesome.
That's what gives it a lot of replayability for the individual, because if you play a different house, your hand's totally different, and you feel like your possibilities
but it has
are
the
different.
same amount of power.
Exactly.
Right.
It's
but
really
it's balanced
system.
well.
It's a good system.
But here's one of the other cool things about the cards. We talked about Gregor Clegane, how you can use him to really take out your enemy units if you know you're going to win. What if you don't know you're going to win, but you definitely could win? Or let's put it a different way. You know you can win if you play your 4, but they might beat you if you play a 3. Well, do you play the 3 and hope they play a lower card because they know they're going to lose and then wipe out a bunch of units?
Boy, that's a powerful situation because no one knows what to do.
Right.
Yeah. There's no right answer because it's not luck.
If you then play, if you play Gregor Clegane hoping to take out a whole bunch of their units, but then they play their biggest card and actually beat you, you've just lost one of your most valuable cards and gotten nothing for it.
Exactly, and that's
on the flip side. On the flip side, if you really needed to kill those units because the very next round you know they're going to come back and crush you, you may be in a position where I don't really want the power tokens that I could get with Tywin Lannister. I really want to kill those units.
That brings up something that I really like about this game, is that the defender has the advantage, as in risk, without dice roll. How did they do that, where it's just the defender, even your units just don't die often.
That's one thing that makes it good.
Ever.
Is the fact that if you're attacked and you lose, generally speaking, you're not just like, oh no, all those units, because most of the time you're not going to lose all of them, and a lot of the time you won't lose any. Yeah. So whenever you're on the defense, you don't care so much if you lose. I mean, you don't want to lose, but it's not like...
You're only really caring if they use a sword.
Exactly. And so it's not like you go to the drawing board because you lost one of your armies. You just come back and attack them next turn with some support from one of your other territories, possibly. Yeah. Or you negotiate with someone and say, listen, he's starting to gain a lot of ground. Can you help me regain some of this? And maybe you'll help them regain some of it instead of yourself. But the game, it just evolves in a way that is... fascinating.
But it still entices fighting. That's the best part, because it's all about the territory. It's not about the units per se.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true. Owning the land.
Right, and getting those territories, sooner or later your expansion, you will run into other players and you're going to have to fight for territory. There's no way around.
And sometimes you might decide, you know what, I'm not going to go for that really awesome territory. I'm going to go for the wimpier one so people don't attack me. Because people, are they going to waste a card to get okay territory? They're probably going to save their cards, their good cards especially, to get the really good ones. So you can use that in your strategy. Do I want to go for the wimpy places and then out of the blue try to go ahead and go for that 7 castles? It's your choice. You can make the choice. So I think we all agree that strategically this game is...
Oh, it's wonderful.
Yeah, awesome strategic level.
And one last comment on that. It's also... the fact that you rarely lose units is actually very realistic. I mean, if you study history and you know anything about medieval warfare, the term decimate, we don't really know what that means anymore because we use it the wrong way. Decimate means you lose 1/10 of your army, and that was considered a huge deal. Generally speaking, in old warfare, before they had guns and all this other stuff, it was very rare to lose a huge portion of your battle. Usually one side would eventually just lose its morale and flee the field. So that, it makes a lot of sense. It's actually very realistic how this game plays out that way.
And honestly, it's that way. Whenever you watch the show, a lot of the time when people leave, they've still got quite a big army with them. It's not like Tywin, or well, not that he ever loses, amazingly enough, but like Stannis or whoever, whenever they run away and leave, it's not like it's just the king leaving. No, he's got a big army with him. He's leaving with an army. So it's the thematic way they make this work. Beautiful, 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 beautiful. So
speaking of theme, should we talk about the theme?
Well, theme-wise, I think we can all just say this game
nails it.
It gets the theme. You feel like you're in that same intrigue and just whirlwind of uncertainty.
You are playing the Game of Thrones.
Yeah,
you are not just playing a Game of Thrones, a board game. You are playing the Game of Thrones.
Because just like in Game of Thrones, everyone's worried about the Wildlings. Here, everyone's worried about the Wildlings. You may not be next to them, but you know that they're bad, and and people people from all over the country are going to the wall, just like that's thematically how that's represented. Everyone's interested in stopping it on some level, and how much you participate in it is up to you, just like it is in the story.
Mm-hmm.
So it just thematically, it's amazing.
Yeah, and I love the actual tracks and everything to keep track of all this.
Yeah, the board real estate is used very well.
Very well.
I mean, it's just the board is designed so perfectly.
There's a large. It looks like there's a large number of moving parts, but it's actually pretty intuitive once you figure it out.
It's controlled chaos, because whenever you just look at it, you're like, whoa, there's a lot of stuff. But whenever you start playing, it makes sense and it just flows.
And if you have that one person who's always bored, make them be Baratheon so they have to move all the pieces.
Exactly.
The one person who's complaining, oh, you'll take so long, make him be Baratheon.
Yeah, the ADHD guy can be over there.
The guy that has to be the banker in Monopoly.
Exactly.
That guy.
He's got a role here.
Yeah.
So that being said, what do we think? Josh, Tolkien Geek, what do you think?
I think I would give this one a 9 out of 10. The only reason I don't give it a 10 out of 10 really is because I'm a theme-heavy guy. I mean, if you've watched my channel and you've watched some of the videos I've done in collaboration with Strategywizard, I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan. I mean, I'm wearing a Hobbit shirt, for goodness sake. And to me, the pinnacle of that theme-based gaming is the War of the Ring. And it shows in the fact that they put a whole bunch of nitpicky, teeny-tiny rules. Like I said, this game is not as bad as War of the Ring. There's a lot of rules. It's not as bad. But in the War of the Ring, all those rules make sense if you know your Tolkien inside and out. It's like, I know why they did that. Here, I'm not as familiar with the Game of Thrones universe. I know less than either of them do about that. I've never followed the show. I know a little bit about it. But even so, the game is extremely enjoyable. And like Strategywizard, we played Gemfire growing up. If you look that game up, and you'll see what we're talking about. You'll look at the map and you'll be like, oh my gosh, it's medieval England, okay?
Yeah,
it's the War of the Roses. It's based on the War of the Roses, just like the game Gemfire was.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's the same idea, but carried out in a much different way. And so, thematically, I still get it. Even from a historical perspective, the War of the Roses, I can see all that going on here. So I get the theme. The theme is very rich. It's just not quite War of the Ring level rich for me. And so, that's the only reason I don't give it a 10, because otherwise it is very well conceived, very well designed. The pieces are great. Everything about this game is good. And just as a comparison, we talked about comparing it to Risk, and is this an upgrade? Yes, this is an upgrade. I am a sore loser. I will tell you right now. They can attest to it. This game is I've lost, I think, every time I played this game, but I enjoy losing every single time. Mm-hmm. And the reason is, unlike in Risk, where you have really no real control over your destiny, you pick where you attack.
And that's about it.
But that's about it, right. Other than that, everything else is up to the dice, and you're just like, why am I losing?
Yeah, unlike in Risk, you could bring 20 people against one, and you could lose. Here, if you bring 20 to 1, not that you can, but
you're going to win.
There's a point you're going to win.
Right. You can bring an army of four knights versus 2 footmen. You've got that one in the bag.
Yeah, you're just going to win.
You're going to win.
Well, and what you said about theme, this did come out before the show was really
super popular.
Yeah,
so they hadn't gotten through all the
right. So I can understand that.
So there is a sense in which it's similar to Risk in that the outcome is not always in your control, because there is that mind game element. There is that, is he going to support me or is he going to support the other player? You know, there's a lot of stuff you can't control, but none of it's just blind chance.
Yeah.
And so even though I've lost this game every single time I've played,
He still wants to play it again.
I still want to play it again. And the reason is I can do better next time. I can
Try new things.
try new things. I can try to get people to join me in different ways next time.
Play a
There's
different
always
house,
Yep.
use boats.
right. There's
Yep.
always a different way you can go about trying to win. Whereas in Risk, it's like pick better territories, get better dice rolls.
Yeah. Roll more sixes.
So again, you know, way better than Risk. Just as long as Risk, but way more fun.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
9 out of 10.
What do you think?
I'm gonna start. I'm gonna start by saying you do have to have the right people to play this game,
True.
Yes, you do.
and that is the only downfall that I have ever seen playing this is the fact that you have to have the right people who don't just get caught up in, well, should I play this or this, this or this, this or this, this or this? An hour goes by and you're still waiting for them to take their turn.
Yeah.
That is the only problem I have with this game. So I'm gonna be that guy and give it a 9.5 out of 10 because of the fact that
I didn't realize decimals were allowed.
I'm throwing it in
60
there.
out of 60s are allowed.
With 60 out of 60 is
so
allowed.
That's a good point.
a lot of things are allowed here.
Yeah.
45 out of 50. So the real point though is that I think that it's really it is a good game. It's a much better updated version of Risk, and well, if you want to call it that. And you can't play it with my group of friends. They're too dumb.
It does take a certain amount of. I don't want to say this and sound obnoxious or uppity, but you do have to have a certain amount of intellect to play this game. It's not for the guy who just wants to lazily play Monopoly.
Let's put it. Let's phrase it this way. It's not a casual game.
It's not a casual
If
game.
if you have friends who want to play party games and stuff that's very light, not for them.
That's all my
Right.
my peeps.
When I say that, I don't mean dumb people can't play this game. I mean you have to be willing to put in intellectual energy.
Yeah,
into the game.
It can be mentally exhausting. It can be if you let it. In fact, I'm pretty sure Tom Vassell of the Dice Tower actually said he will never play this game again because even though he likes the game, he will never play it again because for him it is emotionally exhausting, and it can be. But honestly, that's what I like about it. So
yeah, and that is the only problem that I have. Like I said, I can repeat it all day, but it's just the amount of. You have to have the people who are patient. They have to be intellectually there to make the smart decisions. They have to be able to make those decisions in a timely manner.
if you don't want to be there all night,
And
Yes.
otherwise, you end up with people that just they either get up and they're like, okay, what happened? They're coming in to check once a week. So where y'all are on the game.
yeah,
And
you need people who are engaged and paying attention and
Yeah.
have interest in what's going on.
And even I have a hard time keeping up with these little power tokens because I always end up not having enough. I don't know what the deal is. I'm not good at playing the little crown thing. I'm not good at doing that. So, I'm not the best at this game. But I still won with Stark, which I don't think any of y'all have done that. So I don't care.
That's right.
But
Actually, you made a comment that I wanted to bring up. The fact, the person checking in once a week.
Yeah.
The fact that you all play your tokens together and resolve them one per player at a time.
Yeah.
It keeps everybody engaged. There's no significant downtime
That's true.
in this game,
That
which is
is
another
helpful.
positive.
The
It's not
only
like-
downtime is whenever one person is taking too long to plan what tokens they're going to play.
Right.
yes.
That's the only time, and that's depending on your players. You may have a group that's quick, and that's not a problem. It just depends on who you're playing with. Some people are more
Yeah.
likely to make that take a while than others.
I make rash decisions, so I'm okay.
Yeah, Zach's just like, I'm good. I know what I'm doing.
That's me too. I'm just like, I'm gonna attack.
I'm probably in the halfway ground. I'm somewhere in the middle. I don't take forever. A lot. Sometimes I probably do, but generally I try to go quickly. But sometimes I do have a hard time making decisions.
Especially in the later game, it gets hard.
But everything else though about the game is great. The versatility is great. The number of players you can play with.
Yeah, yeah.
And because let's face it, what's the minimum?
6. You can, it's 3 to 6.
It's 3 to 6. So you can. That's a decent amount.
Yeah.
And isn't there an expansion, or is that good?
Well, there are 2 expansions, and I want to say both of them require 6 to play, but I just want to throw this out there. I'm not going to do a review of the expansions because I have never had the opportunity to have 6 people to play them. So
Makes it kind of hard.
unless something in the future changes and I get that chance, I'm just going to say this about them. They give you a totally new setup, and they put you in the combat right off the bat. Units are all over each other, and I would love to play it because I think it'd be cool to just start off where everyone's already tense and nervous. But that being said, can't really review them. I just think I'd probably give them a 10 because my review of this game is a 10. I mean, this is my first game that I got whenever I got into the board game hobby that made me go, wow, this is the hobby for me. This is the one that proved it to me. Later, if you've watched my other videos, you know Cosmic Encounters is my favorite, but this is the one that took me down the path of liking this hobby as much as I do. So, it's a 10 in my book. They've already said all the great things, so it doesn't even matter. Don't need to say anything else. Thank you so much. Does anybody else want to say anything else before we close?
This video is too long already. Let's stop.
Okay, so thank you all for watching. Appreciate it. And if you don't mind, if you liked it, I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe. But whether or not you do, I hope you enjoyed the video, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye.
Are we?
I'm the tiny guy in this game. I'm like, everybody's gonna be, he's the runner.
I can make myself look smaller.
Hey everybody, this is Strategywizard. This is Josh, also known as the Strategy... God! Okay. Oh, okay.
This way. This way. This way.
Oh, I don't have that light on. All this.
I thought it was dead.
Huh? I changed it out.
Oh, let me do it. I mean, it's easier for me to get out.
Oh, here we go.
Nope, this one. Trying to figure out which arm's which.
I know, it's so hard, that mirror
backwards.
image. Hey everybody, this is Strategywizard. This is my brother Josh, aka the Tolkien Geek, and this is my cousin Zack. Today we're going to be doing a review of Game of Thrones, the board game 2nd edition. This is a game that's designed by somebody I have no idea. I have literally no idea who designed this.
Are we restarting? I think we're
We're
restarting.
restarting, because I have no idea.
George R. R. Martin.
Who in the world
Sit
does
tight.
George R. R. Martin.
Sit tight.
it has the...
I have an unbelief.
I made that loud ass part.
Christian T. Peterson.
I'm not going to remember that. Although... Okay.
Now we're going to do opinion.
Give it a 10 or die. I said give it a 10 or die.
I'm so not good at a 10.
Okay. Okay.
60 out of 60.
4 out of 4.
Oh gosh. Okay. 1 out of 1.3.
If you ask me first, I'm gonna say something dumb. I can tell you
I'm gonna ask you first. Actually, I might ask you first.
You
It's the same
got
thing.
all this blooper in there. We're not allowed to hang out together.